Hello, I'm Tara Ledesma, your host of Gaper's Delay podcast, and welcome to episode 5, where we'll be talking about all things medical. First, I want to start with an audio from my mother. She was probably in her early 20s. Keep in mind when you listen to this audio, it was from the 80s, okay?
I was in an accident 2 years ago, and ever since then, it's hard to put on pants. My leg, I've got a pressed leg, a nerve in my leg, my neck, my back, my shoulder, to reach up in the cabinet to get a box of cereal. It's painful, and at the time of the accident, I had a 9-month-old baby at home. Still to this day, it's doctors. I've seen at least 6 different doctors. They don't care. All they want is your $45 for 10 minutes. Be on your way. I can't get anybody to help me, and what little information I do get from these doctors, they will not explain what it means. And I don't know where to go, what to do, and I can't deal with it anymore. It's really bad.
How crazy is it to think that that audio is from the 80s? But anyway, moving on. She never did get relief. She ended up kind of doctor shopping. She was on pain medication and a lot of other things. And, it's just one thing after another. The school, for me, was my primary care physician growing up. I'm not sure if my mom had one or not. I don't know. I'm going to assume not, because I never had one. So, but I knew to have one for my daughter. Like I knew to have that. So I definitely broke that cycle. But yeah, the school was my primary care. Without them doing all their, touch your toes, reach as far as you can with this ruler, bend over, let me see your spine, that sounds dirty. But, all the different things that they had us do back then for what they, called preventative care actually caught a hearing issue of mine, and I had to get surgery for tubes. So what initially they thought was something of like me maybe not paying attention was more so that I just wasn't hearing everything correctly. And then also the added later inattentive ADHD diagnosis. But, without that, who knows where my hearing would have been, that whole time if it wasn't addressed then. And then also I want to discuss the importance of vitamins. But not every vitamin is good for every person. And it does bother me, in my opinion, that vitamins aren't regulated the way I feel they should be regulated. But there's an interesting documentary that I personally like to watch and recommend to friends of mine. I'm not sure what it's called. You just have to go on YouTube and Google B12 documentary pediatrician David Carr. This pediatrician all of a sudden started losing a lot of his function and ability. And it was interesting that, I don't want to spoil alert, but the spoil alert is in the title, I guess, but it was ultimately a B12 deficiency, and them not catching it could have been his ultimate demise. So it is something I like to personally watch. It's not, for everybody, but if you're interested, Google it up on YouTube. It's almost like nowadays anyway, you have to be your own advocate. These doctors are overstressed. It's crazy how much they monopolize these hospitals, and people who are buying these hospitals were never even doctors or in the business to begin with. So they're buying these they're, corporations, liquidating them. They're not, if you go to, I guess I should have warned y'all in the beginning, but you can rewind it if you need to grab a pen or start typing these out, that B12 documentary with the pediatrician David Carr, if you're interested. And then the second thing that I personally find an interesting read in, and go into a search and type Becker's Hospital CFO report. And if you pull it up, just from, today, the last post looks like it was on the 11th. They discuss hospital that sold for $1 million. They discuss a hospital that's closing over an unstable healthcare environment. They usually update this quite often. So I'm surprised the last update was the 11th. I'm not going to lie. You keep going back the day before and they discuss, a very big hospital to close 6 clinics. The White House pushes shutdown extensions, a hospital, closures could accelerate. And here's the thing. I've been going back all the way to 2019 and started counting the hospital closures. I don't recommend doing that by any means at all. I do not recommend doing that because that's going to blow your mind. But it is an interesting site. And I do know that, nurses do what they can, and, most doctors do what they can, and, they're kind of bound by the medical group that they're in. Like every medical group has a set of different rules and regulations and things these doctors, have to abide by. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. So this is just what I have learned or have been told. Definitely correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Feel free. But that's, what I am to understand. My daughter, when she was born, her pediatrician had all her records were through there all the way up to like kindergarten, first grade, all the shots and all the records. So apparently we go to get her appointment for the New Year's school physical, and the office is like basically shut down, locked up, like there's nobody answering calls. It turns out, it was basically bankrupt in the early 2000s. It was a medical group owned by 8 doctors that ended up eventually getting suspended. So now I have to register my child for school, and you cannot access the medical records. I can't get a copy of her records. The school doesn't want last year's copy. They want a new copy. And those copies are not available which feels so illegal. And I remember filing a complaint, and I remember finding something online where a lot of people were complaining. We had online back then. It just wasn't as good as it is today, but people had the means to communicate. Okay. So calm down, the youngins out there. But, we've seen online that I wasn't the only one that wasn't accessing medical records. And it was like, pass the buck, if you will. Like you talk to somebody, they give you a number, you call that number, they give you this number. I'm being told they're held by, the police or the government from a case. I'm being told they're in a storage unit and I have to fill out some form, which I did. What ended up happening, because I have to get her registered for school, is I wound up Googling her original pediatrician, which was hard to find because, I don't think you can immediately announce where you're going to or like tell all your patients, hey, I'm moving here. I think again correct me if I'm wrong, with some of the clinics, you're bound to, some rules and guidelines. So I had to track this guy down, and I found him, and I made an appointment, and I went in and I said, look, you know what happened as good as well as I do. And I need my daughter registered for freaking school. So you're either going to help me and figure out these dates or figure out what records you have or whatnot so we can get her in school. And that was such a long process with, so now she's at this new clinic with the same doctor. And it was just so frustrating because it was like, how in the world is it that impossible to get something I am legally supposed to be able to have? It's frustrating. It really is, Let's take a quick important break and talk about a very important book to me that I wrote that's on Amazon right now. It's called Reading My Late Sister's Cancer Journal. I took all my sister's journal entries from when she was a teen into her early 20s when she had passed, and I turned the journal writings into book entries. And then at the end of the book, I also included my mom's email updates she would send to me when I was unable to be there. She wanted to keep everybody, including myself, informed on the prognosis and everything that was going on. So those are also included in the book. The book is to highlight the importance and need of family and friends during this time and crisis situation of dealing with cancer. So for that reason, half of all proceeds of every book sold will be donated to Northwestern's Live Well Resource Cancer Center. Thank you. And again, I hope you go to Amazon.com and look up Reading My Late Sister's Cancer Journal and hit that purchase button. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. All right, where were we? Now, see, that's why I recommend being an advocate for yourself and figuring things out for yourself. And it's not that easy to do. I spent a lot of time in a site I probably had no business being in because initially I didn't understand what I was reading, but it's been some years where I've been playing on this site, and I think I'm pretty fluid in what I'm reading and what I'm searching. If you're interested, grab a pen or get ready to type. All you nurses and doctors out there, I know you already know about this site. So I want you to go to your search bar and type in Google Scholar. Hit enter. And then click on the Google Scholar link, and that's going to bring you to a whole nother search bar. And on this search bar, you're going to notice two things. One's going to be like a medical little button, and one's going to be law. So if you want to search case law, you can click on the law, and you can search here for case law, which is awesome. I've used it. Or if you click on medical, you can research medical journals, and you can look up medical journals as early as the 1900s, just medical journals all over. Keep in mind, you want to look at the bottom of the journal. Keep in mind, you want to look at the bottom of the journal, see who sponsored the journal. Are they getting paid for, all the stuff. They're supposed to acknowledge any information at the bottom of the journal entries if they are getting any compensation or whatnot. And then also you can see the cites, how many times it was actually cited or used in other, references. And a high cited journal, could be pretty promising. There might be a reason a lot of people are citing or referencing that journal. So it's something to pay attention to, is that cite number also. And for beginner readers in this, I would start your search pretty basic. Try, if you don't initially understand what you read, scroll down in each journal, whatever journal you're in. You can scroll down just before they give you all the references and whatnot. It'll have, kind of like a final summary, if you will. I know each journal has worded it differently, but it's just above the reference. It's like a basic description of everything in the study and, what they've come to. So that's definitely something to look into. Again, just search up Google Scholar, and that'll bring you to a whole new search bar. And I definitely encourage you to do your own research and advocate for yourself, for sure. It took me years, but I'm, still learning. They say if you don't learn something new every day, then, you're not learning. Is that what they say? They say something like that. But anyway, there are some things I had mentioned earlier, like why there's separation of things like the vitamins and, when you think about doctors and specialties, yes, I suppose it's very good to have somebody who specializes in something and does it over and over enough to where it is, confidently done. But at the same time, in my opinion, I feel like there are some things that actually, you don't even realize that you're supposed to be at a different specialist. And the reason nobody puts the puzzle pieces together is because of the separation of the specialties, which again is why I request people to advocate for themselves and do a lot of research. There's things out there that can be read and determined and confirmed, and there's also some things out there that I wonder about. We're coming into a new generation of, genetics and all this other stuff, and we're really advancing in the medical industry. Despite half the hospital closures and such, there is vast improvement in a lot of areas in, different specialties of medicine, and I have been paying attention to that. I do have some questions, and maybe some listeners out there will have some answers they can throw in a comment or whatnot. But I wonder, in thinking of the kids that have to go through all these different medications, like say you have a child who's on ADHD meds and one's not working and you try another one and then that's not working and then you're trying another one. I'm wondering why the medical industry doesn't, and maybe it's the testing itself that isn't 100% reliable. I don't know. This is why I'm asking. I'm wondering why, before even prescribing any medication to anybody, be it an adult, a child, an elderly, anybody, an infant, that why isn't a pharmacogenetic test now standard? And for those of you, a pharmacogenetic test, in my opinion, is basically a workup of your DNA that tells you what your body can and can't handle medication-wise, as far as stimulants, non-stimulants, etc. And it's a report that the doctors get, after you get tested, and it lists the medications and the possible interactions, not listed interactions. I didn't personally get that. I personally got it was just in the highlighted area. It was a lot of medical mumbo jumbo on these things. That's for sure, but it was definitely beneficial, I think, because it worked for me. It worked for me. Long story short, I was on a ADHD medication I never should have been on. Emails were back and forth with this specific doctor that will not be mentioned, that I would like to be weaned off this, that I feel I'm having a reaction. That answer was a no, and that answer was also in writing. I did advise my primary doctor and another doctor that I had. They were all on the same page. And between that, I weaned myself off, went into my last session with her, unbeknownst to her, and I quit. I said I want a copy of my full pharmacogenetics since it wasn't put into my chart, which is weird. You think it would be. And, that's when I found that, the medication that I was on and having a reaction to and asked to be taken off of, like even slowly, was denied, was actually on this list as a possible interaction. And here's me verifying that there's an interaction here. And it just, I don't know. So I just went with my instinct and went to somebody else. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, yes, I did make a report to the facility that this, person worked at. And, that was what I needed to do, was just let them know, hey, this is what happened, and everything is in writing in the My Chart. So, and that's that. So, but I do wonder why genetic testing isn't standard. Maybe it's just still new. I don't know. I'm curious, because it does seem like it could eliminate a lot of negative reactions for a lot of people and possibly save some lives. I don't know. It feels like something important. I personally, like I said earlier, self-advocate for myself, and I try to do the best that I can, and I try to research what I can and what fits me. Just like a car, not every car runs the same and on the same stuff and runs the same way, and that's the same thing with people. So I have to do what's right for me. I went and I got a full body thermography. I think I said that right, thermography. And it shows you where inflammation is in the body. And I thought that was very interesting. It's new because a lot of my care team were unfamiliar with, readings on a full body thermography, but it was evident to see that there was inflammation there. I had one lymph node both lymph nodes were inflamed, but one of them was on a side where I actually had to have dental work done that I was putting off, like I know some of us do, right? So I went ahead and I booked a dental appointment and I had the tooth removed. I'm currently in line to get a implant put in. So that should be exciting. But until then, you know, it was removed and I did a follow-up thermography in the area and it showed that the lymph node had cleared up. So the abscess in my tooth, I mean, it could have been ironic. I'm just saying, but in my results, it did show that, you know, on that side, the lymph node cleared up and there was no inflammation where, you know, the tooth was removed and the area was clean and there was no inflammation in the lymph node below. So that was great news to me and kind of confirmation for myself that this is something I kind of want to keep up on yearly just to monitor any changes. Now that I have a baseline to go off of, I'd kind of like to keep up with that. It is, you know, pricey, so you got to do what you got to do. I mean, I guess healthcare is pricey too, so I mean, you're paying one way or another, I suppose. Another thing I went ahead and did for myself that I really liked because it was fully informative was a genomic inform test. And it was very informative. I guess why that ends with inform test. It gave me everything that I needed to know. And I actually have a care plan in action. It gave us new information, possible new things to look at or test for, or, you know, maybe just things to be proactive on. So for me, spending money on myself to better myself was worth it for me to do. And I'm hoping in the end of all of this that it does pay off. I guess that will be a future podcast. Who knows? Because advocating for myself and the way that I did it was so expensive, we had to forego so many activities and vacations and going out and just things in life. It almost felt like, you know, I was glued to my couch. It felt like I was starting to live a sedentary lifestyle, and it was getting too much to handle to be that sedentary. Sometimes taking care of yourself means sacrificing in other areas, but just know that, you know, like the ABCs of breathing, you need airway, you need breathing, and you need circulation. So, you know, there's an order of things that need to happen. So I want to thank you all for listening, and I wish you all good health, and I hope you join me on my next podcast that has to do with work and jobs. Thank you, and have a good few weeks.